Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Game Developer Podcast. I'm your host, Senior Editor, Bryant Francis. Quarter Up, the video game studio founded by Skybound Entertainment, is riding high after the release of Invincible Versus, the fighting game based on the brutal superhero saga created by Robert Kirkman. It's the first of what will hopefully be many games from the company's in-house development team, which is also working on other games based on the company's IP. But, as any developer knows, launching a game is rarely the end of the journey, it's only the beginning. What exactly are Skybound's hopes for its future in video games? Today, we're speaking with Skybound CEO David Alpert, aka DA, and co-chairman Jon Goldman about the company's future plans, its strategy behind opening up its own video game studio, and what business leaders need to know about running creative companies in passion-driven markets. And a quick heads up, due to some technical issues, you'll hear Jon join the conversation a few minutes late into the call. These things do happen, you know. Anyway, let's get going. And David, welcome to the Game Developer Podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, first off, congratulations. Invincible Versus has launched. Seems like it's going well. Seems like it's a hit. My anecdote about how I think I knew this game was going to go over well with players was I was down at Gamescom LATAM in Brazil, in Sao Paulo. You guys had a really impressive booth there, and every day I was there, players were lined up for that game. I truly, like, of all the things on the floor, that game was one of the things that was really drawing people in. And it was really cool to see it doing so well in Brazil and Latin America and not just in the United States, I forget, were you down there? Did you get a chance to see that line?
I was at Gamescom the previous year. The Brazilians have been absolutely bananas about both Invincible and The Walking Dead. Like, we have, I would say, more comments per capita from Brazilians than almost any other country on the planet. They are incredibly passionate and supportive. So when we saw the lines for Invincible Versus down in Sao Paulo, we were excited but not surprised.
Yeah. What is it? I guess for a company, with an American comics creator, you're the native language of obviously Skybound, founder, it's Robert Kirkman, his wonderful stories, including The Walking Dead, Invincible, etc. As you guys have, stood up Skybound Games and learned about the international video game market, what do you think it is about Brazil that you think has attracted those players and their passion for The Walking Dead and Invincible, I guess? Like, what do you think is it about the region that's bringing them in?
It's interesting. The amount of pop cultural passion that's going on in Brazil is really impressive. When we had done a partnership with a Korean messaging company, Line, about, I don't know, maybe 12, 13 years ago. And the most messages we were getting were in Korean, obviously, but we were getting all this Portuguese inbound, and we thought this was so strange. And first we were like, oh, it must be coming from Portugal, and they're like, no, it's all coming from Sao Paulo and Rio. And it was literally like this mass. And then we've seen the rise of Brazilian Comic-Con. It's actually now the largest Comic-Con in the world, also in Sao Paulo, run by the same guys. And they show up for events. And I think it's just probably because, like, they're in the Americas, but they're really far away. And I think that when something comes there, they just come out so passionately and they engage. And there's a really fantastic internet culture there where they really sort of pass around their version of, like, what they love, and they just engage in ways that I just don't see other cultures doing.
Yeah, it's definitely like it feels generic to say it's a huge opportunity, right? Like, it's always like any emerging region, it's easy to fall back in business logic and just go, oh, this place is a huge opportunity because maybe your audience is saturated somewhere else. Maybe there's some other factors, and it's like, oh, why not go to this emerging region? But there's always like that degree of, it's not just show up and be welcomed, right? Like, you still have to meet them at their level, meet them with their needs. And congrats, because like I said, looking at that line, I was like, oh man, they really showed up for y'all.
Yeah, it was really great to see. And, we get these heat maps that show sort of engagement around the game and the comic and the show. And it's literally like there's this massive mushrooms over Rio and Sao Paulo specifically.
Yeah. Yeah. So David, why don't I didn't quite mean to kick off with my trip to Gamescom LATAM, but it was just such a sight to see that I couldn't not bring it up. Not only,
Brian, we could talk about Brazil like all day. Like I'm happy to go there. It's anytime.
I may not have much. I only have so much. I could actually. No, actually, now that you've reminded me, I'm doing wonderful podcast hosting right now and keeping focus on topics. But no, yeah, actually, what's interesting. What do you make of the fact that this is happening? Because we hear all the time from players in Brazil and in other South American regions, because their currency is devalued against the U.S. dollar. And games are sort of made and produced against the U.S. dollar. That buying premium games can be more difficult in those regions. But it's not just you guys. I saw so much love down there for Control Resonant, like a huge meet and greet line for the game creative director. What do you think? I guess when you guys are studying the region, when you have a more scrutinized worldview, like how have you assessed the fact that like it is sort of more expensive to buy games down there than it might be up here when you're trying to connect with players down there?
Honestly, for us, it really just starts with passion and sort of the connection with the fan. I think that, sort of akin to what you were saying, you can write the best business model, put the best Excel sheet together, showing that beautiful up and to the right graph and saying, oh, look at these number of kids that are coming into market and their discretionary income is growing. But if the passion isn't there, it just doesn't work. So for us, I think we start with the passion and engagement with the content, and then we can figure out a business plan that makes sense for them so that we can sort of engage that way. And Brazil's just been that perfect sort of Goldilocks situation where we have this absolutely passionate fan base that's been following Invincible at this point as a comic for over 20 years, the show now since 21. And the amount of engagement and adoption of video games and the internet culture that's grown up around video games, I think it really started with free to play for them. But as they've become a wealthier society, I think they moved from free to play into some more of the premium games. And I think that trend's only going to continue. So there is a business case that you can then layer in on top of the passion, but I think it has to start and begin with that passion.
All right, Jon, we had to pause for a second there to help get you in the room. Last minute appearance by Jon Goldman of Skybound here. Jon, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure.
Yeah. All right. So Jon, David, let's talk a little bit beforehand. We were talking about your guys' presence in Gamescom LATAM, about your approach to connecting with Brazilian players. But let's talk a little bit now that Invincible Versus is out there, now that Skybound Games is concentrating on, publishing games from Skybound's IP library. What would you describe as Skybound Games' like high-level vision at this point? Like, how does it want to operate as a company? How do you guys see its role in the video game industry ecosystem? And like, what's sort of like the target you guys are setting for yourselves?
So I think the thing for us has been, we've been in games since the beginning of Skybound. Our first game is we partnered with Telltale and we launched Telltale's The Walking Dead. So we've always been in it. But the goal for us had been to move from being, let's say, in a licensing place to sort of licensing to bring it in-house to publish. And then to actually, the Invincible Versus was the first time that we actually did full stack game development in-house on our own IP and then publish it ourselves. So the goal for us is really just to own end to end so that and it's not just because of economics, although there is an economic component, but it really is to make sure that we're ensuring the quality is there for our fans, because these brands at this point, both Walking Dead and Invincible, are 23 years old, the first instance of them coming out. So we know that these things will last and have massive fan bases all around the world for decades. So the only way that we can actually hurt that is by putting out bad games or bad shows. So we need to make sure that the games that are coming out in our universe are at the same quality, if not better, than the shows and the comics that we're doing. And we want to make sure that we're rewarding fans that way. So the goal for Skybound Games is to build out and build upon the universes that we've created in comics and TV.
I think an important distinction is that we don't see ourselves as separately entering different markets. We're in the fan business or the fan service business. And so we're not entering games or continuing games. We're doing the cool stuff that our fans like. They like comics. They like our TV shows. We also have a merchandise business, and games are really important to them. And so that's why we don't want to necessarily leave it to somebody else. So we still do selective licensing in mobile because we think some of our partners can do a better job than us. But for this kind of thing, we think we need to take matters into our own hands to make the best possible experience.
One of the maxims that we have is you never know where you're going to encounter your fan in its first iteration, right? And so there's a very 20th century way of thinking, which is that there's the primary commercialization and then there's ancillary commercialization. So a lot of times Hollywood folks will look at games as ancillary. And I'm like, no, that's not true. If the first place you encounter something is in a bad value game, right, where you have a bad experience, you're not going to watch the show, you're not going to buy the toys, you're not going to read the comics, you're done. Like there's too many choices out there in the world. So if you're not making something quality for that first encounter, you're toast. And so for us, the opposite is also true. If the first encounter with something is amazing, you've made a fan for life.
Yeah. You've actually raised something I think is it's a huge challenge in this business. It's a huge challenge in Hollywood. It's a huge challenge anywhere, which is how do you, in a healthy way, bind, like a business that is creative at the core that has this very subjective, I'm going to use a business word, and I'm sorry to our creative audience, KPI, right? Like, how do you measure success of something creative? It doesn't even matter in sales, right? Like, we have the word cult hit for a reason. Like, quality is if anyone could pin down quality in a game, a movie, a book, or anything, like, there wouldn't be a business anymore. It would just be locked in. It would be widgets. But at the same time, when you're trying to produce these things, from a mindset standpoint, you bring different disciplines together. The hardest one to bridge can be sort of serving the creative needs and the business needs. And I think sometimes it's about the language we use when we're talking to each other. It's about how transparent we are with each other. And there's no one right answer, but I guess how have you guys navigated keeping that creativity, that storytelling, that visual flair at the heart of the company while navigating this from a business perspective, I guess? Like, what do you think has worked well that has worked well for you guys on that front?
So I think there's one thing about us that's very different than other successful entertainment media companies is that we keep a live creative person at the center of what we do. In this case, of course, it's Robert Kirkman, who, is a partner in the company as well as the creator of the show. And DA's been in business with him for 20 some years. And I now have been for X number of years. And that's very different than like typical media companies where they buy the license to Winnie the Pooh or whatever, or even if it's like George Lucas, and their most important goal is to get that person out of the company. And then you've got like a brand committee or approval committee who tries to interpret in like a slavish, dogmatic way how to like bring that thing alive. And we don't have to do any of that. Robert plays games. We can just call him on the phone. He's actively involved in the game. He comes out for the recordings. He's part of it. And I guess I have a different point of view. And then, I'll let DA chime in on, how do you do this thing that is like, it's hard to quantify. And in my experience, and I've been in the games industry since the 90s, you don't always know what's amazing is going to be a hit, but you do know good for bad. And the key challenge in making any creative product is avoiding the confirmation bias where you kind of know something's bad, but you convince yourself along the way because you want to hit a deadline that it actually isn't bad. And these 500, obtuse keystrokes you have to get around some problem that your team, can figure out somehow is okay because you can do it after lots of practice. Like you kind of know bad. You don't always know great, but you know bad. And the problem is avoiding that obvious bad.
I think, by the way, I love the idea that you combined Winnie the Pooh and Star Wars. I just had an image of him getting his head stuck in like a stormtrooper's helmet, and I thought that was like kind of fun.
Looking for honey. I mean,
yeah.
you don't know what's inside those helmets, do you?
That's what I'm saying.
I mean, maybe you do.
Kingdom Hearts could open this door, guys. Disney could do this through any kind of boring ways, but the most interesting way would be Kingdom Hearts. Anyway, that's not your guys' business. Dave.
But what I was going to say, O'Brien, is that one of the maxims that John uses all the time is that the alternative for entertainment product could be nothing, right? It's not a necessity. Like people do like to be entertained, but you don't have to buy a game. You don't have to watch a movie. You don't have to read a book. You could do nothing. You could go to sleep. There's so many other alternatives. Whereas like let's say food or clothing, you need to buy an item of food. You need to buy an item of clothing. You might not necessarily need to buy the thing that we're doing. So the first thing is it has to be good enough, engaging enough in some way that it's worth your time. If it's not worth your time, it's not worth your time, and it's not worth your money. So we start with that. And the other side is that, quality is subjective because there are things, let's say, like, the whole friend slop genre. I find that to be not interesting, but there is something about it that is appealing to a certain audience. So you need to understand the audience that you're talking to and what quality is for that audience, because quality is not constant across different segments, right? So if you're going for fast food, McDonald's or Five Guys or something like that might be awesome. If you're looking for fine dining, those things aren't going to be sufficient. And I think the same thing is true in games. You might look for something super fun and casual that's completely distracting, or you might be like, oh no, like I need to train for this round of Invincible versus like I need to be in fighting shape because I'm going to get my ass kicked if I don't necessarily think about it seriously.
Yeah. You kind of like, it's funny that the word, like you mentioned, that the genre doesn't appeal to you, the genre being friend slop. And it's sometimes tough, when in the language of how we make things and how we make these things, when now, unfortunately, when a word like friend slop, when the genre name carries a joking self-deprecation about it, and the deprecation refers to what we might call, comparatively, like friend slop is low fidelity graphics, high social design. But sometimes when you're trying to pin down what is good, like John said, right? Like what is good versus what is bad. Those, not only are those moving targets on every different kind of game, but sometimes the quote unquote negative appeal of something, right? Like of jank, like we're in a space where, in comics, like if the art's not good, it's going to take a lot of work for the writing to get over it, right? And good is once again subjective, right? But there are certain bars you can hit that get you, to the front of a comic shop. And in games, meanwhile, like you could have something that looks super ugly or super like not realistic, not even stylized per se. The animations could be stiff, and that's what people fall in love with, and that feels like one of the strangest things about this field. There's no question mark here at the end of the sentence.
Yeah,
John, go ahead.
I feel we learn that lesson over and over and over again in the video game industry, that there's this huge drive on creative teams to sort of match the fit and finish of movies, for example, but physics and physicality almost always win out. Like if you can marry the two and have a beautiful game that plays well, but the example I always give is like if you're playing a driving game and the car doesn't skid when you go in the oil, or you turn the wheel and it doesn't turn exactly when you do it and you end up hitting the railing, it doesn't matter how beautiful it is. You are pissed. It makes you feel bad about yourself. You hate the game. Like you're mad. And so I feel like we make that mistake again and again, and this will date me. But I remember the battle between, and I don't know if you're around this, but like PlayStation Portable versus Nintendo DS. And, the PlayStation Portable is going to be so beautiful, but you had to like take out the cartridge or the cartridge was behind the battery or whatever. And DS was ugly. And it turned out that, it's actually more fun. It was really fun.
Yeah.
And it was,
I would say, I actually, I don't think this is unique to games. I think this is actually endemic across all creative fields. I remember growing up in New York as a big hip hop fan, there's a lot of people that came into hip hop and R&B, and people said, oh, that's not music, right? They're not playing instruments, so it can't be music. And so that was, I think one area. So, I think there's that. I also remember when there was a surge of horror movies at the beginning of the millennia, and you would see things along the lines of, and then there was a bunch of movies came out like The Ring and others. And a lot of people were saying, oh, we don't want to make horror movies. We want to make elevated horror movies. We want to make The Ring and the others. And there was a pejorative sense that horror was to be. All right. And the idea of a B movie in and of itself, right, or as you had said before, Brian, a cult classic, I think sort of was diminishing. So, yes, I use the term friend swap, and I apologize for sort of.
I mean, no, it's the word we're stuck with, right? Like, it's, I wish we had another name, but I saw it pop out and I was like, oh, no, it's stuck. I don't want it to be here, but it is stuck.
Yeah, but I think there is that sense, right? There is that, John, you're talking about PSP versus DS, but you also look at it from the perspective of when free to play came into being.
I was just going to say, free to play, that'll never be a thing in the US and Europe. We don't need to worry about that crap. But
or you look at UEFN or Roblox, right? These things are being made as disruptive innovations inside the game space, and I think that's interesting. But I also think though that this happens across all genres of content. People do really see there's an opportunity, like if it's not at the fit and finish of previous eras, it can't necessarily be good, but it can.
Yeah. Let's talk about, I'd love to ask you guys how you tackled a challenge that it happened to Invincible versus, but it can happen to any game developer. As I recall, and correct me if I get any facts wrong, you guys, the weekend it launched, you guys were getting really positive reception. Reviews were rolling in great. The gameplay, it was sticking. It didn't seem like servers fell down for multiplayer games. But very quickly, you guys had to react to reactions to some of your optional microtransactions, right? Were just for skins, right? Like they didn't involve the game's power at all. But I recall that you guys were reacting very quickly to some negative fan reaction to the pricing on those. Everyone's launch is going to come with some kind of, oh shit, something just lit on fire moment. This was the one you guys had to deal with. Like, what would you say it was like responding to that, and what do you think your team got right and like quickly turning around? Because they did, right? Like I saw you guys react fast and make changes on the fly that might have taken another company like weeks to get right.
So I was going to say, the great philosopher Mike Tyson has a great line, which is, everybody can have a plan until you get punched in the mouth. And, when we had lots of plans and we had lots of sort of contingency plans and, we went to market and we got punched in the mouth. And the great thing is that we have assembled a pretty awesome team of folks here who were anticipating that there was going to be things that we hadn't anticipated, right? That there were the unknown unknowns that were going to come for us and that we had to be ready to sort of pivot. And one of the core values that we looked at as we went to market was, hey, we are going to listen to the fans. They're going to tell us things about this game that we have not thought of. They're going to tell us things about this game sometimes we're going to disagree with, but we have to listen to the fans and make sure they understand, because we're new, right? That even though the company's been around a while, they haven't seen us publish a game that we've developed. So we have to show them that we're listening to them. So when that happened, it was everyone was like, hey guys, it looks like we priced this wrong. People are upset about it. We need to be out there doing it. And that was honestly, there's 100 different versions of those types of things that we were doing. And at every single step along the way was, this is not a hit and run for us. This is a long-term relationship with our fans. Again, Invincible's I've been working on Invincible for 23 years, and I fully intend to be working on it for the next 23 years, God willing. And so the thing for us was we need to make sure that fans understand that this is a commitment on our behalf and not just sort of a quick hit.
So a couple of self-congratulatory comments. Not for me, but for the company, is I don't remember, you asked, what it was like on the inside. I don't remember panicking. Like, as business owners, we were not like in their face. Like, we completely trust the team to do the right thing. And, pricing is a black art. Like, it's really hard. Like, you need to try and price things so that you can stay in business and support the game and whatever. And if you overprice, you have to make changes. And we're thinking about stuff, but the team responded immediately. And this gets back to your question about why do it internally, is like, this team cares about this there wasn't like a bunch of conversations. Oh, you want us to do this? Oh, there's going to be an overage, or whoa, that's really difficult. Our guys are not in over the weekend or whatever it is. Like, in our team in particular, come from the fighting game community. We know, like, as business owners, that they would be humiliated if they let down their community, and it is their community. So, like, I don't remember having panic calls with you, DA, or like being anything other than like, just, we got to deal with this.
Which also speaks to like crisis management anywhere to any company, right? For any kind of thing, is that panic can be one of those things that, especially when you're at the top, if you panic or overreact, managing a moment like that, like it feels like we all human, we all make mistakes. Maybe sometimes we react in a way we'd prefer that we didn't. But the way to make it through a moment like that is to sort of like be in a position where you can take that breath, like let the hit land. If we're gonna go with the boxing metaphor here, you can have any plan you want. It doesn't survive to get punched in the face. But if you can't, find that space to recover, then you're just going to get a hit more. I don't want to keep leaning on Mike Tyson here because he's not the most reputable character.
I don't want to get punched. Like, I don't even think a mouth guard could help me from getting punched in the face by Mike Tyson. So, like, this is scary.
Yeah.
I just think it's important that you realize, for me, and again, not to make too much of Iron Mike, but I think part of it is that if you're going to take a game to market, there is going to be something that you didn't expect that happens.
Yeah.
And how you handle it. And yes, there wasn't panic from Jon and I. The team handled it. We trusted the team. They reported up, here's what's going on. Here's our prospective solves. What do you think? And they were totally on it. And we had complete confidence. The team is led by Chris Paulson, and he's done a pretty amazing job.
Yeah. Shifting topics, going to talk about the team, Jon. If for your time in the industry, and I can't believe I've had 10 years plus now to actually say I've seen changes as well. It feels like as people are trying to start up new studios that there's one lesson that folks are trying to learn from the past. The game industry, like many industries, is built on a foundation of production practices that unfortunately lead to crunch. And even the best intentioned teams will find themselves crunching. The best intentioned teams have to wrangle with, what happens when your team is so passionate about something, they throw themselves into it and pull those extra hours. For someone who's been in it as long as you have, it has no doubt seen things that I can't even conceive of when it comes to this. How do you think the company is managing to create that space where the team, can put that passion in, but not get ground down by the work hours to the point that, you're going to have turnover like crazy, and the team that makes the next game is going to be practically different from this one? I guess, what are your thoughts on that?
So I've said this privately, not publicly. I've never been involved in a game production like this where the team was actually at a true beta when they said they were going to be months before and were actually polishing. So I think we have this combination of, the actual development team led by, Mike Willett, and this cohort that he put together are fighting game fans. And I think that they, could have fallen, prey to overloading it to the hilt and burning themselves out because they're such fans and they just want to do such a great job. And they were lucky to pull in this, publishing and marketing team, principally from Activision Blizzard, who were used to running, pretty intense long-term projects. And the combination of those two things led to, like, I don't know, 30 years I've been doing it. I've only had this one experience where it actually, was managed to a time frame that felt sane. And the guys were working hard, no doubt, but it just felt really sensible. And, we all talk about, all the project management stuff that came in the games industry came out of like the defense industry, right? And we never completely perfected it. And there is all this overwork, but it worked out in this case. And I think in general, like, DA's been managing creative people forever as well. And I think we have a respect for them that, you know, maybe wasn't common in other phases of the, you know, video game industry that, you know, if you remember, went through this whole like love affair with, you know, the practices of consumer goods. And, you know, you can't really, if your main input is people rather than cardboard and plastic, you can't treat people like cardboard and plastic.
Actually, Jon, I'd love to follow up on something you said there, which is, and I think I understood it and followed it, which is, you know, game industry production practices sort of having Defense Department sort of origins in some ways. And in my head, I follow that as a downstream of, you know, if you look at where games come from, which is games are downstream from tech, tech is downstream from DoD stuff. That's my understanding of it. Am I correct there? Or is there, I'm curious what spawns that comment a little bit.
I was speaking more specifically of project management. You know, this whole concept of project management, I don't know if it was the same like, you know, 100 years ago, but this idea of what it takes to develop stuff to mil spec was very much like, you know, something that came out of the military. And so they had to get on top of, you know, project management to like a great degree. And then I think technology and then the video game industry, like the other thing, if we're going to get all historical about it, is if you go back in the video game industry, like you could build an early game even in the odds with like a few people, like just a couple. And then, you know, early PlayStation games you could do with like a dozen. But once you got to PlayStation 3 and had teams of like 80, 100, you can't just do that by, you know, like we're just craftsmen in our little workshop. Like that takes organization. You end up with a management layer. You've got way more dependencies. And so that just necessitated adoption of project management tools. And we're lucky, again, can't take credit for it. Like DA and I were having meetings on this, you know, every week, all the time, but our team really, you know, did this on their, you know, they're just grown-ups.
I think that one of the things I would add to that, Brian, is just that I think in any creative endeavor, constraints are really important. I think, you know, you can really flourish when you have a specific box that's put out there for you to play in. And then you can be incredibly creative inside of that. I think the other side is that certain creatives have no respect for budget, and certain people can be sort of too. And there's certain finance folks or business minded folks that sort of have no respect for the creative. So getting that balance right, that intersection, I think is really really critical. And you know, one of the things that we try to instill is just that, you know, our resources are the lifeblood that allows us to make these things. So we have to steward and shepherd them well. And I think that the team led by Mike really sort of embraced that type of thinking, and they wanted to get certain things in. So we're like, okay, cool. When we're a year out, a year and a half out, we're tracking like, hey, if we continue on this path, we're not going to be able to do this, but we can do that. And they were able to really sort of take those types of constraints to heart and figure out where we can make the best possible thing. And I think they really prioritize the things that were important to them and to the fan.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
I
no.
would like to just add one more point, because I think DA actually made an excellent point there. I'm not going to name names, but some of the companies like that you probably covered that were like startups in the video game space that got like seed rounds of 100, 150 million dollars and didn't make it. That's because it's like without constraints, you're just all over the board. Like you actually, you know, you need to set boundaries for your children, and in this case, the children are the games, not the people.
Yeah. Yeah. One, I can, it's fun. Well, like you said, no need to name names, but the hair pulling reality of seeing a lot of studios stumble through those moments in the last few years, both, you know, they're both being, there are many individuals, however the mistakes fell, excuse me, suddenly having to dance around this topic because we discussed not naming names. There's many reasons a project can fail, right? There's many reasons a company can fail. Certainly, I feel as though the like you said, right? Like once you're handed, like kid in a candy shop level money, and you don't spot the restraints and you don't quickly work to get things to market, like studios raising all that money and then spending 3 years and nothing ready to ship is scary to me. You guys are in a position where it sounds like you don't have to rely on, what so many in the game industry were relying, which is that VC money, right? Like that focus on investors who are seeking an exit. It feels like working under Skybound and Skybound's business model being, like a very yeah, you have investors, but your job is to make money off of players, right? Like you're not trying to sell Skybound. It feels like you guys almost, would you say that that's like been a supporting edge, right? Like that it reduces the pressure on how projects proceed and such?
I think we're really long term. Like, DA is younger than me, and when he says he expects to be working on Invincible for 23 more years, like I actually believe him. Like we often talk about like we have the company that you would do if you sold your other company that you felt like you weren't interested in. Like what would be more fun than making comic books, TV shows, video games, and action figures? So like, what's the rush?
Yeah, right. Like no need to exit when you're doing the thing, like you're not building Amazon, I guess, but you are building, you get to go out there. This is something I've gotten to experience with my little bit of dev work on the side is when you wander out there and find someone having fun with your game, playing with it, seeing someone with your toy, they got it on your shelf or whatever. Man, that's just, there's no feeling like that. I don't think you can get that feeling from any other business. And that's a reason, to maybe, I've talked to a few CEOs recently who are like, we're not going to do this to make the most money ever. We are doing this to make games. And there's just once again, those intangibles, right? Like that feeling of seeing someone else like connect with it, that even if you're not in the heart of creative, you wherever you are on it, you get to feel a certain feeling about it that's more satisfying than yachts. Yachts also don't seem that satisfying, to be honest. I don't know if you guys have ever been on a yacht. They seem fine. It's just a big boat.
I love boats, and they're very fun.
Okay, Brian, you're talking to the wrong guy. Like Jon does love boats.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But small boats. He likes small.
My grandpa did grow up with I did grow up with my grandpa's sailing ship, so I've not a yacht, but certainly I've been lucky enough to do so myself.
So I ran Foundation 9 off of a boat in Marina Del Rey. So we had 1,000 employees, and that was my main office. And
that is, and look, I say this with all love as someone who lived in LA for a decade. That's one of the most LA things I've ever heard.
Well, it was at a period when office rents were really high, so I convinced myself that the slip fee and whatnot was cheaper than renting a boring office in Santa Monica. But then, just like with games, there are unexpected punches in the face with boats, that's for sure.
Yeah. I feel like a boat is just a long series of unexpected punches, if I remember my grandpa's time maintaining it correctly.
So fun.
Yeah.
So fun. You won't convince me otherwise.
Fair enough. Let's what do you guys, I think here is one challenge that when you're working at when your company's IP based, when you're franchise based, right? You're not sort of making one individual story after another. When you are working on long running series, when you have when you have a deep well of story to adapt from, because Robert, has committed himself to these series in this way. Saturation and audience interest is this nebulous thing we talk about, right? Whether you talk about superhero fatigue, live service fatigue, whatever, like saturation is certainly, it can happen this is almost like a thing that like entertainment businesses actually share with other businesses, which is like, you can just like oversaturate something. Quality doesn't matter. If there's too much of it, it's easy to get lost in the noise or people get tired of it. From your guys' standpoint, like, is there anything definitive you pin down about like what can be done to mitigate that, I suppose? And luckily, superhero fighting games are still, I would say, not saturated. So Invincible Versus is in a great spot. But you guys are, looking at, a lot of other games and a lot of other genres that you're going to play in with franchises that have been around for a while. What have you guys thought about when it comes to saturation?
I guess, Brian, I'm going to disagree with the premise of the question. I actually don't believe in that degree of saturation. I think that what happens is that quality degrades, and that it's easier because it's sort of a gradual thing. It's like you're slow boiling the frog. And I think that, when Marvel came out with the MCU, I think it's went on perhaps the greatest hit-driven run in Hollywood history, right? They had more movies, do more business. And by the way, each of them were like genuinely fun and creative and engaging in very different ways. I think at some point it collapsed underneath its own weight, where the movies just weren't as fun anymore. You had to know 50 or 60 different other movies or books or storylines, and they were all tied together, and it was no longer delivering the core value proposition, which is like, hey, I want to go have fun 2 hours at the movie theater, right? It felt like homework as opposed to being a good movie. But I felt like they probably had a run of 15, 20 years that was as good as anybody's ever done. And so I think, so some people say, oh, there's superhero fatigue. And I'm like, no, I don't think there's superhero fatigue. I think there's people just don't want to see difficult superhero movies that aren't as engaging as they were before. I think the bar gets raised. So, I think whether it's Invincible or The Boys, there's plenty of interest in superheroes. I think still it's a genre. And I think, just like we were talking before about, let's say, Friend Swap, people who don't like that specific genre are always eager to turn the page on it. Having worked in horror for, almost 30 years at this point, people always are quick to say, oh, horror's over. But the one thing you can count on is that horror's never over. And it always springs fresh, whether, there might be a year or two where there's not as big of a horror game or horror movie or horror show, but horror continues to sort of, come out there. So I think it's the same thing with superheroes, that basically it's quality that drives the lack of interest, right? When you had the infamous Batman nipple suit, people were like, oh, Batman's dead. But like, no, it was the nipple suit that was dead. It wasn't Batman. Batman's huge, right? Then you have the Dark Knight. People are like, oh, Batman's amazing. Like, how did Batman come back? You're like, oh, you made an absolutely amazing movie. That's how it came back.
I've never heard DA discuss the nipple suit. So this is actually a world premiere here.
Very good. Yeah.
I have a lot of feelings about that nipple suit, John. A lot.
I suspect someone out there can say 5 on LinkedIn. We could go 5 lessons from the nipple suit that you need for your next game development studio. And you could do that earnestly, or you could do that cynically. But
it sounds like lesson 1 is don't do it.
Fair enough. Unless you're in a certain genre. Anyway, Jon, David, thank you so much for joining me today. Congrats to you and the whole team and all the folks who put in hard work on Invincible Versus. And I look forward to seeing what else comes from Skybound Games in the future.
Brian, thank you so much. It's an honor to be on your show.
Yeah, thank you for spending time with us.
A huge thanks again to Jon and David for coming on the Game Developer Podcast. I really like the points they made about how you want every gateway into your franchise to be a great spot for new fans. That's the kind of product-focused thinking that I personally think we need to run strong game studios in 2026. Today's episode was edited by Pierre Landreau, and our theme music is by Mike Meehan. Thanks for listening. Who knows? Maybe if Skybound keeps up this pace, maybe they'll be able to look at other big comic companies like DC and Marvel and their video game adaptations and be the ones who get to say, look at what they need to mimic a fraction of our power. I'm sorry, referencing the meme was my only good joke for ending the episode. Thank you very much, everyone.